Okay, here we go. Sorry it's taken me so long. Hopefully this will be of some use at this point. So I'm going to go really quickly through these, try and make these videos as short as we can. So the first worksheet that I'm going to do is this inverse function. So let's just start with the first one. If you remember, in order to find an inverse, we just switch our x and y. Switch x and y. Okay, so to solve this first problem, all I'm going to do is switch my x and my y. So now I have x equals the square root of y plus 3 over 4. And then I'm going to solve for y. So because I see that this is divided by 4, to get rid of that I'm going to multiply by 4. So now times 4 times 4. On this side I've got 4x equals the square root of y plus 3. Then I'm going to square both sides in order to get rid of my square root. So raise this side squared, raise this side squared. That gives me 16x squared equals y plus 3. Subtract 3 from both sides, so that leaves me with y equals 16x squared minus 3. Now, very important to remember is that when you, actually that's not applicable here. Okay, great, so here's my final answer. So you should be able to get the second one. Alright, let's look at the second, or number 3 is talking about compositions of functions and solving for f of 2, g of f of x, etc. Okay, so this first one, the way that I'm going to look at these problems is I'm given two functions, and right here it's telling me to find g of f of 2. So I'm going to start from the inside out, so I'm going to look at this 2 right here, and this 2 belongs to my f function. So what that means is that for my whole f piece, I'm going to replace x with 2. So f of 2. F of 2. So what does that mean to me? I'm going to look here at this f of x. I'm going to plug 2 in for my x value. So that's going to give me 2 times 2 minus 7. Okay, solve for f of 2. So 2 times 2 is 4 minus 7. That leaves me with f of 2 is equal to negative 3. Great. Now if I look back to my original question, it says g of f of 2. But now we know what f of 2 is, so I'm just going to go in and I'm going to replace f of 2 with negative 3 because that's what it tells me it's equal to. So I can come in here and say I know that f of 2 is equal to negative 3. So g of negative 3 now instead of g of f of 2. Alright, great. So now that I have g of negative 3, I'm going to look at my g function. Everywhere where I see an x, I'm going to replace it with negative 3. So g of negative 3 equals negative 3 plus 7 divided by 2. Negative 3 plus 7 is 4 divided by 2, which is just 2. So that means that if I go back to the beginning, g of f of 2 equals 2. Okay? Awesome. So you guys should be able to do numbers 4 and 5 on your own. Let's look at the next problem, or the next page. Oh, this is a good problem. Okay, so for problems 6 and 7, the table shows several values for the function g of x. Okay, if g of x is a one-to-one function, all this one-to-one function means is that for every input I have one output. Okay, so if that confuses you, all it's telling you is that it's a function. Okay, it will pass a vertical line test. Alright, so now I'm going to say what is the value of g negative 1, 2. So g negative 1 means inverse. Okay, so let's just make a little note right here, inverse. So if we think back to what I said before, I said that in order to solve for an inverse, all we have to do is switch our x and y values. Okay, and then if you think back way back when we talked about f of x and when we talked about g of x, those are just fancy ways of saying y. So if I look at this right here, this graph tells me I've got an x and I've got a y, right? Because g of x is just a way of saying y. Alright, and now I'm looking for an inverse. So whenever I solve for my inverse, all I do is I switch my x and my y. So what I'm going to do here at this table is I'm just going to switch my x and my y, okay? Inverse. So for my inverse, that means that this column is now my y values and this column is my x values. So now I'm going to work backwards, and I know that g of x means y, so this would be my inverse of g right here, and this is my x. Now if I look at the problem, it says what is the value of the inverse of g when x is 2? So inverse of g of x when x equals 2. Alright, so I'm going to look at my inverse column, and then I'm going to find where, I'm going to look at my x column, my new x column for my inverses, and I'm going to find when I see 2, and that means that when x is 2, when x is 2, my inverse is 1. So g of -1 at 2 is 1. I'm looking at this section right here. That's it. So now if I look at the second one, g inverse when x equals -2. So come here, find -2, and what's my inverse? -1. So my inverse of g at -2 is -1, and that's all you have to do for those problems. Alright, and then let's look at these last questions on the page. So number 8 is talking about compositions. So compositions mean that if I solve for f of g of x and g of f of x, that they're going to be the same thing, that they come out to the same problem, okay? So I'm going to plug in and I'm going to solve for them. So we're going to work the same way that we did with our other problem. I'm going to get another color to make this easier to see. So let's see if make sure this green one works. Cool. Alright, so I'm going to call f of x is going to be green. And then g of x is going to be purple. Alright, so let's look at f of g of x. We called g purple, we called f green. Great. So I'm going to first look at my x function, and everywhere where I see an x, I'm going to replace it with my g function. Alright, so right here is the first thing I see is an x in my f function, so I'm going to do x minus 2. And then let's pick back up with the rest of my f function, plus 3 times x minus 2 minus 1. And now I'm going to go through and I'm going to solve it. So on this side, I've got x minus 2 times x minus 2 plus 3, and then I need to distribute here. So 3x minus 6 minus 1. Okay, I'm going to FOIL all this stuff. So I've got x squared minus 2x plus 4 plus 3x minus 6 minus 1. And now I'm going to condense all that and simplify it. Okay, so I've got x squared minus 4x plus 4 plus 3x minus 7. And I can still keep simplifying. So now I've got x squared minus x minus 3 is my f of g of x simplified. So now I'm going to do the same thing with g of f of x. Alright, so now I'm looking at g of f of x. So now I'm going to look at my g, and everywhere where I see an x in my g function, I'm going to replace with my f of x. Okay, so the first thing I see is an x, so I'm going to come here, and I've got, alright, let's do it like this. X squared plus 3x minus 1 in parentheses minus 2. Alright, because it's all addition and subtraction, I can just drop my parentheses. So that leaves me with x squared plus 3x minus 1 minus 2. I'm going to condense. So that leaves me with x squared plus 3x minus 3. And this and this are not the same, so they are not compositions of each other. So you should be able to do number 9 on your own. That is our inverse functions worksheet.